All is quiet. We laid there, quiet, frozen in place, bodies pressed against the damp cool soil, staring up at the burst of light above us. All of us contemplating God knows what, life's choices up to that point, thoughts of home and what we would do once we got back, our loved ones. No one's to say what man thinks of on occasions like these. I looked around, having been lost in my thoughts. It was quiet, eerily quiet for a place such as this. Just as the silence was becoming comfortable, however, it was broken just as quickly. A senior of our group shouted into the night, and we rose from our ditch and started across the field. With the bright illuminates that continued to dot the sky, lighting our way, we traversed the open field as best we could. But as the ground became more uneven and we were dealing with obstacles that were natural and man-made alike, we were suddenly befelled upon by streaks of orange and yellow light, as if we had stepped on a hornet's nest. As the hollow thuds rang out into the air, as each streak of light passed through the bodies of my friends, my brothers, I took to the ground, finding cover in a partially blown-out trench. I laid there once again, hard pressed against the loose, damp soil, listening to the cries of my brothers, listening to their pleads of help as their limbs were being blown apart by enemy fire. Then I sunk within my mind, momentarily lost in my thoughts. Thoughts of home and what people will say and think if I come back, not how I left, but if I returned maimed. Will they think different of me? Will they think me a disfigured freak? I lay there, my thoughts continuing to betray me. I look around, feeling helpless, and quickly realize my entire company has been wiped out. They call this ground no man's land, and now I can see why. I close my eyes briefly, and once again it becomes quiet. And just as before, it's eerie, for it should not be quiet on a field as this. I'm on my back looking up to the sky, and even though my eyes are still closed, I can see the bursts of light exploding in the sky. The whole field is engulfed with light from the explosions overhead. Just as the quiet was becoming calming, I heard a whistling in the distance. I couldn't make it out, but it was becoming closer and closer. Just as the whistling became louder and louder, and the light became brighter and brighter, I opened my eyes. But when I opened my eyes, I could no longer see the field. I could no longer see the bodies of my brothers. All I could see was darkness. In the trenches. My grandfather Gerald, who since passed, was a wonderful man who used to love telling stories about his childhood. Although it was easy for him to talk about his past, there was one topic that was taboo, and that was the time he served in World War II. Now, it was during one of our family get-togethers that he seemed distant. Worried, I began to pester him for answers, until finally he broke down and said, "She's coming for me." Confused, I asked, "Who's coming for you?" He paused for a moment and said, "She is." Then began telling me his story. You know that I served in World War II, right? Well, when I was 19, I was shipped off to Germany. For a guy like me, who grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, It was difficult to adjust to a foreign country. To make matters worse, I, along with hundreds of other men, were forced into trenches for long periods of time. Although I wasn't a particularly religious person, I would oftentimes find myself praying to God for the war to just end. Anyway, on one particular night, a strange woman wearing one of those old nurses' uniforms appeared out of nowhere. Puzzled, I wonder how this woman even got here. The nearest village was 5 miles away. But before I could ask, she'd already entered the trenches. We shouted at her to stop, but she wouldn't listen and continued to walk without any care in the world. Now, as the other men approached her, they began to fall, one after another, until finally she reached me. As we stood there face to face, she began to change like something right out of a nightmare. Then, without warning, she reached out her now withered hand and touched my shoulders, leaving a searing pain like that I have never felt before. Afterward, she lifted her now normal hand off my shoulder and vanished into thin air. I sat there for hours, crying and thanking God for sparing my life, but realized at that moment she might come back. So I concocted a plan. After building up some courage, the liquid kind of course, I grabbed a weapon and shot myself in the leg. They found me 2 hours later, unconscious, but alive. Eventually, I was sent back to Pennsylvania, where I met and married your Grandma Marge. Lately, though, I've been seeing this woman in my dreams. And now, after all these years, she's finally coming back for me. The Last Voyage. Last night, as I was rummaging through the attic, I stumbled upon my granddad's journal. I was over the moon, eager to learn more about the grandfather I never had the chance to meet, as he passed away before I was even born. All I knew about him was that he was a biologist for the government and worked on medical cures. But as I flicked through the pages, my excitement turned to shock as I reached the final entry, an ending of life note. In it, my granddad wrote about feeling guilty for his involvement with an organization called SS Nightshade. My heart sank as I read his final words. As I put the journal down, I noticed a letter lying next to it. It was addressed to my granddad and written by a journalist, asking for a comment on an article before it was published. The letter only added to the mystery and confusion surrounding my granddad's past. The contents of the letter are as follows. It was the year 1931, and the SS Nightshade was undergoing secret government experiments in London. Onlookers claimed to have witnessed an eerie green-blue glow that seemed to envelop the ship as her generators began to hum. In an instant, the Nightshade vanished without a trace. Days passed and the ship was spotted in Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. But before any investigation could take place, it disappeared once more, reappearing back in London. The crew, however, were not the same men who had set sail. Some had gone mad, others had fallen ill with mysterious ailments, and some were said to have been fused to the ship. Their limbs melded with the metal, still alive, but trapped in a living nightmare. The government, in their infinite wisdom, sought to cover up the incident, classifying all documents pertaining to the Nightshade as top secret. But rumors and legends of the cursed ship and its ill-fated crew spread, causing fear and paranoia amongst those who knew of the experiments. It is said that on certain nights, a ghostly green-blue glow can still be seen surrounding the Nightshade, a haunting reminder of the horrors that occurred aboard her decks, a chilling reminder of the dangers of playing God. Misinterpreted. The year was 1812. British and American forces were at war, and each side had native allies who were familiar with the battlegrounds for centuries. Enter the Drett family, your average American family at the time. John, the father of the family, was a carpenter, while Bridget, the mother, took care of their twin children, Adam and Wendy. The family was situated in upstate New York, and they led a relatively normal life in comparison to the cross-border chaos occurring around them. But this changed when the American Army discovered that John's native father spied on the Americans during the American Revolution, which happened before the War of 1812. However, the Drett family were given a chance to redeem themselves through the form of a unique task. John and his family were to enter British native Algonquin territory as spies to find information that would aid the Americans in the war. Fast forward to 1814, and the Dretts were successful at this task, relying lots of useful information to the American Army about upcoming attacks. Although Adam hastily murdered witnesses of their operations, the natives always blamed it on the Wendigo, a cannibalistic spirit of Algonquin folklore, resembling a rotten elk carcass. This allowed the family to maintain their facade. However, the natives were getting suspicious, wondering how the American Army was able to intercept many of their attacks. Different rumors were thrown around, and some natives even lynched their friends, who were accused of being spies. Eventually, the issue had risen to the point where it had to be discussed by the village council. Under orders from the Americans, John and Adam attended the council's evening meeting. By sunset, the two men had still not returned home from the meeting, and this worried Wendy, who set out to the meeting house to find them. When Wendy arrived, she found her father laying on the ground outside the meeting house, profusely bleeding, with chunks of his face entirely ripped out. With his dying breaths, he shouted, "Adam! Wendy! Go!" Suddenly, a blood-covered and injured native, armed with a dagger, charged through the house's door in Wendy's direction. Taking a quick glance into the meeting house, she saw numerous other bodies in a similar condition to John. Doing as her father said, Wendy ran towards the nearby forest. She was quickly losing stamina, and the native was catching up, until he eventually did catch up to her. Wendy stopped, accepting her oncoming fate, and then the native ran past her and didn't stop running. Like anyone else would in that situation, Wendy took a few seconds to process what just happened, and thinking back to her father's last words, she realized that she misinterpreted them. Adam! Wendigo! Wendy slowly looked behind her to see two large elk antlers gleaming in the moonlight. Although top American generals were sad about the demise of their reliable informants, the feeling was bittersweet, as it also proved that their cryptid-infused serum experiment was a success. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.